Hello friends, and welcome to the Joy of Miniatures Painting. This is the very first project we're going to be doing on this channel. This is the very classic D&D monster, the purple worm. And I chose this for a couple reasons. One, it looks freaking cool as heck. I love all these little spiky bits. And of course you got that nice big maw there with all those sharp pointy teeth. And the second reason I picked it is because I find that larger minis are actually easier to paint. Which may seem counterintuitive, but because they're so much bigger, the details aren't as small, so you don't have to get in there with a, little tiny paintbrush with a single pixie's eyelash coming off of it. So you can just use some more normal paintbrushes, and I find that's a lot easier to try to do with the bigger ones. So before we get started, I'm going to run through what I've got here. I've got my brushes, and again, this is just a basic variety pack that I picked up from Walmart. It's got a whole bunch of different sizes. Don't have to be anything really special or really expensive to get started. Same thing with the paints. I've got just some basic Walmart paints here. We've got purple, of course, the most important color. Princess purple, specifically. I'm sure that's an important distinction. We've got toasted marshmallow, which is a personal favorite of mine. This is really good for doing bone, and I'm specifically going to be using it for all these little spikes coming off this guy. So that's going to look really nice. I've got a couple different shades of brown here. This chestnut and chocolate sprinkle. Just looks like brown to me, but we're going to be using those for the base here. You can see these coming up out of the ground. So he's got a bunch of rocks and dirt and stuff there. We're also going to be using this gray, timeless gray, for the same thing there. Use that to color in some of the rocks. And then we've just got a basic black that we're going to be using for a couple different things, just to sort of weather it a little bit. You'll see when we get there. And then finally, I have a pink paradise pink, very important. And we're going to be using that for the mouth. So that's all the colors. And this will all be a single video, but it's going to be done in multiple parts, obviously, because we're going to have to wait for paint to dry so we can do different layers. And if you figure you probably don't want to see that, if you do want to watch a YouTube video of paint drying, I'm not sure I can help you with that. So let's get started here with the fun stuff. We'll start with the purple. Make sure the cap's on there nice and tight. Shake it up to get it mixed. It tends to settle after a little bit. And then I always tap it a little bit just to make sure that you don't get paint built up around the edge there. Otherwise it can sort of pop out on you when you take the lid off. See? Yeah, it does that. All right, well, we'll get to that here in a second. So we're going to grab one of our larger brushes. Doesn't have to be too big, since we're not doing any serious area here. All right, and you just pick a spot and get to work. And with this, especially because the way the segments overlap, got to make sure you sort of get in there in the little nooks and crannies here, and the tip of the brush is pretty good for that. Oop, as long as I don't hit the camera while I'm painting, of course. And you can see, you can still kind of see some of the gray through that. So we may end up having to do a second coat once this dries, but we'll see how it looks. And you gotta wiggle in through there between all the spikes and whatnot. There you go, hitting that camera again. And don't worry too much if you get some on the spikes itself, because we're gonna paint over those obviously when we get to that stage. Let's move this over here a little bit. Try to stay clear. Get mixed in there, and this part is probably going to be the single largest step, just because there's a lot of worm and a lot of purple to do. I do enjoy purple worms though. They're just really cool looking. One of those classic D&D monsters that you don't really see outside of the hobby. Some things like orcs and goblins are a little more generic, and obviously everyone's got them, but D&D's got that nice block of very unique monsters that you really only see in Dungeons & Dragons. probably because they'll sue you if you try to use them anywhere else. But that's a different conversation. Although, there are, there's ways of making them legally distinct enough to be able to utilize them. At least I know MCDM, Matt Colville's company, has something called a kingfisher worm, which is also a giant burrowing worm that's very purple in color, but it's not a purple worm. It's a kingfisher worm, extremely different. At least different enough for legal purposes. And, I kind of encourage that. That's, the idea of a giant, heck, if we're going to go into the idea of giant burrowing monsters, I think Frank Herbert could probably sue every last one of them. So that's hardly a unique idea to D&D or Wizards of the Coast or TSR even. So it's nice when people can make their own versions of things and still get to enjoy them. And the cool thing about this is, while this is a purple worm miniature, there's nothing going to stop you from using it to represent any number of other similar creatures. One moment. And at this point, we're just trying to get paint on the thing, so if we end up having a little bit of mess on the spiky bits there, we can not have to worry about that. And I'm not going to paint the belly yet. We're going to get to that later with a different color. I'm probably going to use that toasted marshmallow because it's a nice sort of off-white, sort of a dirty white-looking color, which I think makes sense for a critter like this that spends most of its time underground. Let's see, we'll get up in there. Don't know how well you can see that. The rocks and whatnot are kind of in the way, but so purple worm was actually one of the very first things I ever painted. I was running with a group a while back, a couple years now, and the DM had a purple worm exactly like this one. It was one of the unpainted ones, and he kept wanting to paint it, but he just never got around to it. And eventually I just volunteered. It's like, hey man, I'll take that and give it a shot if you don't mind. Like, all right, yeah. And so I was really pleased with how that came out, actually. That's kind of what got me started on trying out miniatures painting. And then, of course, he tried to kill us with the mini that I painted for him, but yeah, that's just how that goes. Not literally us, of course. So this thing's pretty hefty with those spikes. You probably could kill somebody with it. Don't recommend that, though. Certainly not on YouTube. Oh, shoot. Am I even allowed to say kill on YouTube? I guess we'll find out. I am talking in the context of a game, obviously. He used the purple worm to try to eat our characters. And so this is what I was talking about. Like, it's really not that difficult to get started. I mean, you see, there's no super secret ninjutsu technique here. You just time and effort. Yeah, you got to be a little bit more precise when we start getting into the details, but this is the easy part. We just slap some paint on there and call it good. Yeah, we're definitely going to need to do a second coat on that. I haven't gotten a lot of chances as a DM to run a purple worm. They're kind of high CR critters, and most D&D games don't get to that point. In I've had 2 opportunities to actually field one of these guys. Hopefully I'll get another chance now that I'm going to have a good mini that's going to be all pretty and painted. Oh well. Just a hazard of the hobby. It all washes off. It's one of the other nice things about using these simple little Walmart paints. A little bit of soap and water, and that stuff will come right off. Oh, but yeah, actually getting to feel the purple worm. The very first time that I attempted to, I had some players who were they were still fairly low level. I think they were level 9 at that point, which is pretty good for D&D, but it is not all that good when you're talking about fighting a purple worm. They were in some mining tunnels underneath a dwarven stronghold, as one does. And they were looking for something, and they kind of wandered right past it without realizing it. And I didn't want to just tell them outright, because I'm a big believer in player agency. You know, I'll give you signposts, but I'm not gonna drive the car for you. But after a certain point, they just kept wandering downward into the Underdark, and I indicated that, hey, you're starting to get into some weird stuff here. Like they're seeing fungus. They're feeling, they're starting to feel like volcanic activity, like geothermal vents and stuff like that coming up. Got a lot of paint on that one. Where's a big section that we need to paint over? I guess we'll just start in on the head. But yeah, I was trying to give them some subtle hints to let them know, hey, your princess is another castle kind of thing. And they didn't really, they were just having fun. They were all relatively new at that point. They were level 9s. They'd been playing for a while, but it was their first campaign. So I may have been a little too subtle in that regard. But anyway, they just kept wandering into the Underdark, having fun, fighting stuff, And eventually I thought, okay, let me stop hitting the camera with the back end of the paintbrush for one thing. Let me, give them something a little interesting here to kind of let them know, hey, maybe turn around, maybe go back the other way. So I threw a purple worm at them. And proceeded to roll nothing above a 5 for the entire combat. And I do all my combat rolls right out where the players can see me, because I believe that adds to the immersion, the verisimilitude. Because I don't like the idea of my players ever even suspecting that I am fudging the dice in their favor. Never mind the fact that they might think I'm fudging it against them. So I do all my combat rolls right out in front of them, so they could see that I was rolling for crap. And they beat the heck out of that purple worm. The 3 of them at level 9, which was a tad embarrassing, honestly, as a GM. But yeah, they made a purple worm retreat. And at that point, they started to wonder, hey, wait a second, I don't think we're in Kansas anymore, Toto. And so they started sort of thinking back and backtracking a little bit and realizing, oh, wait, we missed our quest objective about 2 hours ago. Let's see here. We could use a little bit more in there. Yeah, so we just gotta go back through and dip into these little nooks and crannies here. And again, don't worry about getting, that's fine. Don't worry about getting paint on this part, because this is just the first coat. We're going to go back through and get everything nice and pretty afterwards. Let's go ahead and flip this guy over and get some paint on that underside of his chin there. That's too much. And we'll call that the dividing line. So that's where I'll start painting the belly color on there later on. Trying to make sure this stays in frame properly and not not blocking it while I'm trying to get different angles here. But yeah, so that was my first experience trying to run a purple worm, which obviously, I mean, it's a heck of a story. I'm sure they remember it. That time that the three of them at level 9 beat the heck out of a purple worm. And that's the important part, really. I mean, the silly little stories that we remember years and years later, I think that's why we play these games. All right, so that's got pretty good start on there. Yeah, I think we got at least a decent first coat. Let's go back over here. Maybe some of these spots are dry already, and we can start putting on a second layer. No, okay, not quite. Yep, I think we're going to need to give that some time to dry properly before we can really start doing a second coat. Make sure we got all that get this thing spun around here. All right, that's looking pretty good. This, yeah, that's going to need some more work there. Oh, get in there, and we missed a couple of spots in between the spines here. And that's one of the things I learned when I was starting to do this is don't sweat the details too hard. I mean, I'm not trying to make a not trying to make a competition-ready miniature here. I just want something that's going to look good for the table, which means that, needs to look good at maybe a foot or two away. If my players start busting out a magnifying glass and critiquing my paint skills, well, I'll just throw a second purple worm at them. Nah, if you game with the kind of players who are that nitpicky about your painting skills when you're DMing for them and, trying to make cool minis for them to fight, you probably just need to find new players. That is an important lesson I have learned in the last 23 years. Not having a D&D game is better than having a bad D&D game. And you are under no obligation to keep toxic people in your life just because you play D&D with them. I have had to walk away from groups before over things like that. I've had to kick people out of my groups before for things like that. And it always feels really awkward in the moment, but it's always much better in the long run. So, even if you don't enjoy my painting, hopefully you can enjoy my life advice. Certainly have made enough mistakes to have plenty of it to give. All right. I think that's going to be good for now. So we'll go ahead and wrap this up, let that dry, and come back to it later. All right, we're back. That purple isn't quite dry yet, but I figure we can get started in on the base here. While we're waiting for that, I'll just use the spikes here to hold on to it since they're still fairly dry. Or, well, they're perfectly dry. I haven't painted them yet. And I still got some light from outside, so I figure we'll get a little bit more done. I like painting using natural light. I find that it just makes things show up better. You get a better look of what the thing's actually going to look like when it's all done. So, however, it does restrict the times when I can actually paint. So we're going to start off with the darker brown. I'm going to do a nice thorough base layer on the bottom there. And then once that's dry, we'll go back over with some of the other colors and get a little bit more personality. And painting with brown is always a little awkward because until you really start to spruce it up a little bit, it just, looks kind of unappealing, especially when it's giant lumps like this. Well, that is a nice brown, though. You can see why they call that chocolate. But yeah, we just got a bunch of rocks here to paint. And again, lots of little nooks and crannies to get into. So we just make sure to do a good thorough job. Get in there with the tip and wiggle it around a little bit. Get a good solid coverage. And again, we're not looking for anything too fancy here. We just want to get paint on the plastic and get started there. And in here, we'll worry about this mostly when we start doing further layers. Oh shoot, yeah, you couldn't see that at all. But in here is going to start getting a little tricky because you see it, the base of it goes right up to the base of the worm. So we're definitely going to have some overlap on the color there, and gonna have to go back through and do some touch up once everything else is done. But we're not going to worry about that for right now. Just gonna get some paint on there and have a nice base layer to work with. Let's flip this around, see if we can get a better view on it for you. Yeah, and rocks especially, you got to be real careful about the, oh shoot, well, that's why I use a drop cloth. All right, well, there's some stuff here I got to get to that you're probably not going to be able to see very well because I got to kind of jam the brush down in there in this little gap. So might not make for very good television, but it needs to be done, so please bear with me for a moment here. Yeah, probably gonna have to get in there with a smaller brush because this thing is a little too big for that level of precision. But it is good for just getting, there we go. Yeah, for just getting the big stuff covered real quick. This is a good example of why layering is important. And we'll see that with the purple too once I get back to that. But because things in nature generally aren't just one tone. Like even if you think of something, like grass being green, like you're gonna get different variations and different shades, even on the same blade of grass. Just little minor variations, imperfections. And if you can try to duplicate that in your paints, it's just going to look better. It's going to look more natural, feel more natural. So we're going to do a nice solid base layer in this interesting shade of brown. And then we're going to go back over with the chestnut and give it some highlights, and then maybe some gray over that, especially on these rocks, to try to break it up a little bit. Give a little bit of variety. Of course, if you really want to be extra, I suppose you could get some actual dirt and glue it on here. Maybe some little fake shrubbery, like you see a lot of wargamers will do that. They'll add, they'll add little fiddly bits to the bases of their units to make it look like they're actually standing on proper ground, which is pretty cool, I think. A little bit beyond the scope of what I'm going to try to do here. But that's always the nice thing about miniatures painting, is you can take it as far as you want to. Oh, yeah, you can't. Yeah, the base is a little bit hard to see from the top. Oh, goodness. Well, again, that's why I use a drop cloth. Yeah, painting the base is a little bit difficult to see from the top, so this will probably be a less interesting section, but hey, that's why I started with the purple. That's what you came here for. You wanted to see that worm. And hopefully, now that I've got you hooked, kind of an interesting phenomenon with what we call dad jokes, because I do not have children, but right around the time I turned 30, I started to really enjoy making bad puns. So I think what we call dad jokes are really just 30-year-old man jokes. But, that's generally the point where most guys are starting to have kids and getting to the point where they can understand those jokes. So just kind of a coincidence. See, we got a little bit of splash damage there on the bottom of the worm, but since we're going to be going back over that later anyway. So that's the kind of thing you just don't worry about in the moment. We'll fix it in post, as I say. Not that I'm going to do post production, but we'll come back over it and fill it in later. Well, the nice thing about this darker color is we seem to be getting pretty good coverage on the first pass, at least the parts that I can get the brush down into. All right, I missed a nice big spot there. That's why it's important to spin this thing around and look at it from different angles. Try to figure out what it's going to look like when it's done. And get some more down in there by the base. And we're going to be using a much smaller brush when we go back in to do the detail work on that. So just use the bigger one for now to slap some paint on there. We get into there like that. Nope, not quite. I'm gonna have to try to thread down through here. There we go. Oh, but I was saying earlier, I've had two opportunities to actually field a purple worm. The first one I told you about was that trip down into the Underdark. And the second one was actually with the same group at their appropriate level. Purple Worm 2 Electric Boogaloo, as it were. But I modified the Purple Worm a little bit because they were in an elemental dungeon. They're actually running a series of elemental dungeons, one for each of the 5 core elements. Well, I say 5 core elements. So, lightning, cold, fire, acid, poison. So the 5 dragon elements, which is actually the reason they were in there, because they were dealing with Tiamat and all kinds of stuff. So they were fairly high level at that point. But yeah, so I had a purple worm, but it had a frost breath and cold attacks and whatnot. So modified it a little bit, but it was the same. It was the same basic stat block chassis, just with a couple little adjustments here and there, and that went pretty well. That was a pretty solid fight. They did not, I actually rolled above a 5, so that helped, but made them actually have to work for the victory. Not that they didn't work the first time; they just got exceedingly lucky. Which is good, because they were at the point where, one really good hit from a purple worm could have easily dropped one of them. Okay, I think that is gonna do it for a starting layer on that. What is that? Is that a random... Oh, hello. Nope, I think we got a... No, okay, I don't know what that is. Looks like I got a hair caught from one of the paintbrushes on there, but I think it's just a seam in the plastic. And that'll happen, I mean, with any kind of paintbrush, but especially these little cheap ones. Sometimes you lose a hair and you kind of dip from the side and you just pull it straight off and wipe it off. That's why one of the reasons I keep a paper towel here. But I think that is going to do it for our first layer on the base. And looks like the purple here might actually be dry for the most part. So yeah, let's just put up the brown. Swap back over. Grab that brush from earlier. All right, so I'm going to avoid grabbing the base because that is not dry. So we'll start at the base with the purple and work our way up. Yeah, and this is... We're gonna have to get in there with a smaller brush. Once the brown is dry and we're completely done with the base, we'll go back in and do a little bit of touch up there to make sure. Although if you miss a few spots, like you've got some brown here on the bottom of the worm, I mean, it did just come out of the dirt, so having dirt on it is not unreasonable. Again, don't game with people who are going to critique you that heavily, because you might have missed a spot while you were doing touch-up paint on your miniature that you were using to run D&D for them. Being a DM, I gotta stop hitting that thing. Being a DM for D&D or any kind of tabletop game, really, it's kind of like being a tank or a healer in an MMO. You are the one in demand. So if people are giving you crap for no good reason, just go find new people to play with. DPS are easy to find. A good tank is worth his weight in gold. Nope. So I've got the camera set on a fairly low, the camera's pretty close here because I want to be able to actually see the camera at the same time that I'm seeing the miniature. That way I can make sure that I'm in frame and, I'm seeing what you're seeing. The downside of that is it's really easy to hit the camera with the back end of the paintbrush. I say that, and then I get too focused on what I'm doing and not paying attention to what the camera is seeing currently. I actually have another game that just recently started up with that same group of players, which was pretty cool. I ran that first campaign for them. It lasted just a little over 2 years, actually. Ran from level 1 to 20, which is a rarity if you know anything about D&D. And of the four players that started that campaign, 3 of the originals were still there at the end, along with 2 new players that we'd picked up. But that is an astoundingly low attrition rate for a D&D game. But I actually, after that, we kind of lost touch for a little bit. And then just a couple months, actually, probably no more so than a month or two ago, I ran into one of them randomly, got to talking, and they're still hanging out. They were interested in continuing. They hadn't played D&D in a while. And so we actually just started a brand new campaign using Draw Steel, Matt Colville's game that just came out a little while ago, which they were really enthusiastic about, which I appreciate because I am just now learning the system. So the fact that they're super interested means that my job is a lot easier because they are already, they're learning how to play it. So I'm hoping I'm actually going to get a chance to use this in that game, the aforementioned Kingfisher worm, which has stats in Draw Steel. Oh, well, okay, well, I guess the brown's fairly dry at this point. Well, not quite. Largely dry. But yeah, so that will probably be my first opportunity to use this miniature once it's done. And of course, if any of them see this video, then I've just kind of spoiled that. But hey, it's a while off, so you know it's going to happen. You don't know when it's going to happen. When you least expect it, the worm shall emerge. That sounds kind of weird, actually. I'm not going to say that. Let's cut that out in post-production. I say that as though I have an editor watching this who's going to, do things like that. This is a one-man show. I'm thinking we might be pretty good on this second coat. Gotta get a little bit more in on these spikes here. And I'll do once all the primary coats are done. And yeah, I say all the primary coats. This is probably going to be the only other coat we need on the purple, and then we're going to have to go back over the base and add some other colors into there just to make it look better. But yeah, like once all that's done, and then I've painted the spikes, I'm going to go back through with the purple and a small brush and just do a little bit of touch up here and there to make sure everything looks good. But I do believe, we still got a few more, a little bit more to do here in between the spikes. Actually, looks like we got a pretty good coverage on them. Oh, I think that gap on the chin came from while he was sitting down. All right, I think that is going to do it for that. So now we just got to let all that dry. And that'll probably be the last bit of painting I do today, which means I'll come back and revisit this once all that's good and set. All right, and we're back with part 3. We're up to about 40 minutes at this point, I believe. I'm thinking this whole project's going to take right about 2 hours, because as you can see, we've got most of the heavy stuff done. We've still got the belly to fill in, and then we've got to get all the details and whatnot. And I think we're going to be working on the belly for this next section. But before we do that, there's something I want to check out. So it was always my intention to do a sort of a dark light brushing over that using the black, just because that purple's a good solid base color, but it's just a little too pastel for my taste. So I was going to dirty it up a little bit, but I also have another idea. So we're going to try both of them with just little test strips here, and then we'll see what it looks like. So we're going to start off with the black. Get that shaken up nice and solid. All right, and because we're just going to be doing kind of a dry brush technique, we're not going to be using a whole lot. So we're actually not going to use the bottle, we're just going to use the cap, because that lets you really control just getting a tiny little bit on the tip of the brush here. And then with as little paint as that is, it's going to dry very quickly. So what we're going to do is do very, very quick back and forth strokes to kind of spread that paint out. That way it doesn't have time to settle anywhere, really. Oop, that was probably a little too much. So but you see that just nice, very quick, sort of messy strokes to get that paint sort of skettled out there, and you see how that that dirties it up a little bit, takes off some of that, some of the prettiness, I guess you could say. No, I mean, if you want your, if you like that purple, don't need to do anything with it. But I just wanted it to be a little more gritty looking. So got that in there. That's fine. But the other thing I wanted to try out. Go ahead and put the cap back on this. We're not going to be using it again for a little bit. The other thing I was thinking is going over it with this metallic, this amethyst, to give it kind of an iridescence, like a beetle carapace. I think that might look pretty cool too. So, and again, this is a little bit more fancy, I guess you could say, than the paints we have been using, but it's still only a couple bucks from Walmart. So again, you don't need to do anything too crazy expensive to get cool effects. So get that shaken up. And with that, we're not going to be doing we'll be doing a full proper coat, so I'm going to go ahead and get a decent amount on there. That way we can see what this is going to look like. Well, that effect is a lot more subtle than I was thinking it was going to be. But I do believe, let's get a nice, all right, so we've got our nice Barney purple there for the main color. And then this is what got dirtied up with that black sort of dry brush effect. And then that is that amethyst. And I do think I like that. Let's try to zoom in a little bit here so we get a nice contrast. So there's the amethyst and there's the purple. So yeah, it darkens it up a little bit. I think it has a similar effect to that, without looking quite so messy. And that iridescence is nice. Yeah, I think we're going to do that, actually. So let's go ahead and start in on that, and we'll get to the belly here when we're done with that part. So let's go ahead and get around front here. I guess we'll start with the chin, just to make sure we don't miss anything. Hey, brief interjection here. This next segment's about 10 minutes or so. I apparently forgot to plug in my microphone while filming that, so the audio was just using the default mic on my phone. So it's going to be really quiet for about 10 minutes, and then it's going to go back to normal, just letting you know so you don't blast out your eardrums when it switches back. If a little bit of that base purple is showing through, it's not going to be a big deal. because it's just kind of blend together and give it a little bit of that variation we were talking about earlier. So you'll have you might have little spots where that base purple is showing through, and it'll just look like small variance in the creature's skin, the outer shell, as it were. Yeah, I think this is going to look really good when we're done. Get a nice solid coating here. And this is, a perfect example of this. We're probably not going to have to be super cautious about getting down in the segments here, because I think having that two-tone layer, when you look at it, where it's like, in between the segments is that base purple, I think that might actually look pretty good. So we're not going to sweat too much on that. Yeah, there we go. Oh, gotta flip this guy around and get it on his shoulder here. Yeah, I'm already liking how that's looking. That bit of a metallic sheen to it. And yeah, you can I don't know how well the camera's picking up the difference here, but at the very least it looks like it's picking up the metallic as opposed to the that sort of pastel basic purple. And you see, we can just paint straight over that black that we did earlier, because it was doing that light brush technique. It dries very quickly, so you can just kind of go straight over it here without any major problems. But I do like using that effect. It's really good for sort of adding some weathering type effects and just making it look a little more real, for lack of a better term, I suppose, because especially for something like this that lives underground, it's not going to be, it wouldn't be all pretty and clean like this. But if you want to darken up your mini a little bit, sort of make it feel a little more grounded, a little less like a toy and more like an actual critter. But that is one of the beautiful things about painting miniatures, is you can do it however suits you best. There is no wrong way to paint a purple worm. I mean, you could paint it neon green and give it bright pink spikes if you wanted to. That would actually look interesting. If maybe some kind of post-apocalyptic Fallout type world. Have a rad worm. That actually sounds pretty cool now that I'm saying it. Someone should do that. I'm sure someone has. Gosh, there's probably someone in the comments right now saying those already exist, dude. Here's a link to the wiki. I have never actually played Fallout. I've seen people play it. I've heard a lot about it. I've never played it myself. But that does seem like the kind of thing that would exist in that world. I know they have rad scorpions, because I have heard many of my friends lament the existence of rad scorpions. All right, get a nice little coating there. And again, since that base layer is on, we're not gonna be super concerned with getting every little bit here and there. Looks like some of that black is actually still showing through, surprisingly, but that's fine. It's, again, just little variations. So I think Looks like we've got a full coverage on that amethyst. So we're just gonna let that dry. Get this, whoop, hello. Get that capped back up. All right, so now we've got the bill. All right, so the main areas we've still got to paint to, actually get paint on the Mini. We've got the mouth, we've got the belly, and we've got the spikes. I think we're gonna do the mouth real quick because that should only take a few minutes. So I've got that pink that I'm gonna be using for the inside of the mouth, but again, it's a little too pastel. I mean, this is like bright bubblegum pink. So I think what we're gonna do first is I'm gonna do a base layer of black in there, and then once that's dry, I'll do the pink over it, and that should hopefully should darken it up a little bit, so it doesn't, so it just doesn't pop out quite so much. All right, so get back into the black. I'm gonna use a smaller brush here because it's a much smaller area we're trying to get into. Which I managed to get some of that amethyst paint on it, just demonstrating there. All right, so black paint's getting a little gummy. That's one of my older paints, so it's not in the best shape anymore. I should probably add some water into that and try to thin it out a little bit. Oop. Stop it. There we go. All right, and the mouth especially is going to have a lot of those little nooks and crannies and little mini teeth coming out. So you gotta jam it in there, get back and forth, so it'll really get into those bits, especially with this base layer, because we don't want any of that plastic showing through. So, oof, that was chunky. Yeah, definitely gonna have to get some water in there and try to. And of course, I probably should have done this before I did the body. That way I'd have more places to hang on to this thing. So, lesson learned there. But yeah, it's getting some good coverage in there, so that'll give a nice base layer, help darken it up a little bit when we get into the pink. Might not even do a full layer with the pink, just kind of a nice solid coating. Let some of that black show through a bit, just to darken it up. And always make sure to turn it a little bit as you're painting, so you can see different angles, because you might notice, like that, you might notice spots that you didn't get, that you can't see from the angle that you're currently at. I suppose that kind of applies to life too, now that you think about it. Don't be afraid to turn things around and take a look from a different angle, because there might be something you're not seeing. It's a philosophy argument I've heard before, is that there's no such thing as a contradiction. If you encounter something you think is a contradiction, chances are you just don't know the whole story. All right, I think let's get a bit of a look in there. Yeah, we still got some bits in there, but I think that is probably gonna do it for that first layer there in the mouth. Okay, I didn't get too much paint on my hands. All right, go ahead and cap that black back up. All right, so now we've already got that brush is dirty, so let me grab a second one here to get to work on that belly. There we go. Yeah, that should do. I always just wash my brushes between segments here. I'll just go wash them in the sink. Again, water takes that paint out without any real trouble. No need to get anything fancy with your bucket of turpentine with the little screen on the bottom. It was kind of a dated reference, but if you understood that, then you're my kind of person. I mean, I suppose it's not that dated of a reference. Even people who were born after Bob Ross died knows who he is. All right, so let's get some of that burnt marshmallow here, and we'll roll this guy over on his back. And if for some reason you don't know who I'm referencing, Bob Ross is the guy with the afro and the happy little trees. I'm sure you're at least familiar with that. All the stuff's up on YouTube. It's definitely worth checking out. Even several decades later. Heck, I think he's been dead for 20 years. Great guy, though. And his videos are still quite pleasant to watch. He was kind of ASMR before ASMR was a thing. I will very frequently listen to his videos when I'm trying to wind down or go to sleep. This is very soothing. And of course, that's where my reference at the beginning of the video came from. His series was called The Joy of Painting, so it's a little bit of a nod to the OG. All right, and well, I guess as long as we're here, might as well start hitting some of the inside of those spikes, because they're going to be painted the same color anyway. And yeah, I can already tell we're probably gonna need a. Oof, yeah. See, that's where it's gonna get extra rough down there in the base. You can see I've already splashed over a little bit. That's gonna be the very last thing we do is get down in there near the base where all this stuff is overlapping, and just do very light touch up to get all the colors where they need to be. Because right now they're just getting all over each other. And this brush is a little too big for that, so I'm not going to sweat it too much right now. Yeah, main thing trying to do right now is just get this belly painted. Let me move some of these here real quick so I can get this paint out of the way. There we go. Yeah, and that belly's got a lot of wrinkles to it, so it's gonna have a lot of nooks and crannies to get this paint down into. And with it being a lighter color, it's not going to coat nearly as well on the first try, so we're definitely going to need to do more than one. And you can already see even back there, a lot of that gray is still showing through from the plastic. Let's see here. I do really enjoy this color, though. It's great for this kind of thing. It's good underbelly color here for this guy, and of course it's fantastic for bone and horn and stuff like that. Oof, yeah, this part's getting a little twisty. But I suppose we're far enough up I can just grip the base now. If nothing else, that's nice and dry. I don't know how much of this you're going to be able to see, unfortunately. So I will just try to get it done quickly. Try to at least keep it kind of angled where you can see what I'm doing here. And again, also trying to get some of that basic color onto the interior of these spikes, since that's the color we're using for them as well. Oof. Yeah, this is definitely gonna need some more work later. I think this will be a good color for his belly because it's already got some, you know, it's a white-ish color, but it's kind of off-white, eggshell white, I don't know. I mean, it's more of a really light yellow. But point being, it's kind of already got that dirtied up look. So I don't think we're going to have to modify it at all once it's on there. Just got to make sure we get a good thorough coating. Oh, yeah, that's an awful video angle. But let's see, what do we got here? I think I've already told you both of my purple worm stories, so I can't regale you with that again. I did have one of my other games just this past Sunday. That went pretty well. It was, stop it. That game's been, I've got a couple of regular games I run, but there's 3 games total, but they're all every 2 weeks, so they kind of leapfrog over each other. But one of them was this past Sunday, and they were headed south into a swamp. And they had some general objectives. They were just kind of exploring at the moment. But they came upon this village that was all up on stilts because it was near the coastline in a sort of a estuary bayou kind of thing. They started introducing themselves, asking around, just trying to get general information before they headed deeper in. And one of the players asked, what do you folks do for fun around here? And they were absolutely delighted to discover that the local pastime was getting drunk and going out into the swamp, finding a couple of alligators, and getting them to fight each other and betting on it. Not to the death, mind you. Most animals in nature, unless they're eating, unless they're trying to eat you, they're not going to fight to the death. They just want to drive you off. Because, even if you win that fight, if you get wounded, it ends up being bad for you. But yeah, so they were especially delighted to find this out because one of them is a druid, and turning into an alligator is one of her favorite things. So she snuck off from the rest of the group, went and turned into an alligator, allowed herself to be found, quote unquote. And then so they were kind of rigging the alligator fight, which one of those ridiculous things that can only happen in a tabletop RPG. I mean, I guess not only happen, but by gosh, if like the designer of a video game managed to predict that you'd do something like that, hats off to him. Yeah, that's those are the kind of silly things that you get from a tabletop RPG because you have literally infinite possibilities. Okay, so I think that's a pretty solid base coat on the belly there. I don't know how well you can see that. This mini is, I mean, I love the pose. It's very dynamic. It's, it's roaring up out of the ground, about to try to eat you. In fact, I think this is the exact pose that the one in the monster manual is in. They just translated it to 3 dimensions. But it does make actually seeing and getting to the underbelly a little difficult. I think actually the next mini I'm going to be painting is for that game. Discordance Overflow is what it's called, which is kind of a goofy sounding name unless you know what's going on, which I do. And they're starting to find out as well. But the very basic premise, the TLDR, as the kids say, is that they woke up in basically cryogenic tubes. They were like medical recovery tubes, kind of like a Bacta tank from Star Wars. They didn't know who they were. They didn't know where they were or why they were there. But they wander out into this post-apocalyptic wasteland. It's a fairly generic fantasy setting, but it's in the ruins of this much larger high-tech civilization, and they start having flashbacks and weird memories of being in that civilization. And so now they're wandering around trying to figure out what the heck happened, who they used to be. And they're getting memories of being part of this organization that was not quite in charge, but kind of enforcement, police, that sort of thing. So they're starting to question if they were in fact the bad guys. And I'm not going to say any more than that because they might be watching this. No spoilers. But I think the next project I'm going to be doing is something for that game. Which is no longer going to be a spoiler for them because they have encountered one of these creatures. Well, not this one specifically, but they are now aware that these creatures exist in the world, so seeing one of them will not be a spoiler. Unless they just really want to be surprised when it pops out at the table. Okay, I think we're good on the belly. So I'm going to set this guy down. And we're going to get started on these spikes, but I'm going to need a smaller brush for that. So I'm going to set this down. How much smaller is the question? Got to strike a balance between having fine enough control to get in there, but also a big enough brush that we're being time efficient. Because this is already, goodness gracious, this is already the longest segment of this video thus far. This, well, at least this part you can see now. Oh, heck. All right. Actually, I'm going to go ahead and set this down for the moment because the body is still very wet, and that's going to make it difficult for me to handle it properly in order to get to all the spikes. So we'll go ahead and cut off this segment here, and I'm going to go clean my brushes and give that some time to dry, and then we will be back later. Hey, brief interjection here. This next segment's about 10 minutes or so. I apparently forgot to plug in my microphone while filming that, so the audio is just using the default mic on my phone. So it's going to be really quiet for about 10 minutes, and then it's going to go back to normal, just letting you know so you don't blast out your eardrums when it switches back. All right, going to pop back in here for a quick segment. The big stuff we did in that last bit is mostly dry, so it could probably be good to continue on with the spikes, but that's going to be a much longer segment, I think, just because there's so many of them. So I think for now, at least, I'm going to save the spikes for tomorrow when I've got a little bit more time, and I'm going to do another layer down here on the base real quick. That shouldn't take very long. I can knock that out real quick, and depending on how long that takes, we may go ahead and do the pink in the mouth there as well. So we've already got that base layer of the chocolate sprinkle. So now we're going to take the chestnut, get that knocked away from the top there so it doesn't catch a bottle on us. There we go. All right, and we're not doing a total layer on this because the idea is that we're just going to add some, well, I say that and now I use a little too much paint, but we will address that. So yeah, actually here, let's move that out of the way and we'll just use the cap for now, just to get, a fair bit, but not too much. Let's just scrape some of that off there. Because the idea, again, we're going to get some splash over on the base. The idea here, yeah, there we go. That's what I'm trying to do. Just going to try to do some sort of highlights on that, just to vary up this sort of darker brown color we've got going on here. Make sure you get mixed down there in the little nooks as well. And see, you get kind of that striated look, where you've got the darker color down in the gaps, and then this lighter color over top of it. And so it gives it some variation. It's not just all that really one solid monotone brown. Get down in there around the base. And because we're not trying to do a super thorough coat, it doesn't really matter how good the coverage is, or if you have areas that are a little bit more saturated and a little less saturated, because the idea there is to just give it a little bit of depth, a little bit of a little bit more realistic look. And honestly, I probably went a little too heavy in some of those spots, so we may need to, once that's dry, go back over with that chocolate sprinkle and just do a really light brushing over it to dull it down some. Yeah, that's pretty good. All right, so yeah, we don't need to do much more with that for the moment. That hardly took any time at all. So we'll cap that for now. We'll switch over to the pink, because the body is pretty much done. Once we do the spikes, we're probably gonna have to go back in and do a little bit of touch up around the base just to make sure that the colors aren't overlapping too much, and I need to be careful handling the base of this thing while I'm doing that, because it's still all wet. The belly's going to need another layer, but the body's done. With this, I'm hoping it should just be a one and done on the mouth. And then a little bit more touch up on the base here, just to add a little bit more layering and variety to that. And then after that, it's really just going to be the spikes, which will be a little time consuming just because there's a lot of them. But other than that, I think we're in pretty good shape. So let's knock this out. Oh, and we got to do the teeth, of course. But we'll do that in the same color as the spikes. We'll just do that as part of the same leg. Yeah, see, that's like Pepto-Bismol pink right there. So glad we did that base layer in the black to try to dull that down a little bit. And with this tiny little brush, I'm just going to use the cap again. Get all up in there. Oh, during the break, I actually looked it up. Bob Ross died in 1995, so it has been more than 30 years, and I feel very old now. Kind of got that distortion effect where things are longer ago than you thought they were. Happens as you get older. Yeah, I'm not old, I'm 40, which I guess to some of you might be old. Statistically speaking, I am past the halfway point. It's actually a really good meme I see floating around every now and then. It says, it's sort of referring to that idea. It says, what I think sci-fi from 20 years ago was, and it's a picture of the original Battlestar Galactica from the 70s, and then the bottom of it is what sci-fi from 20 years ago actually was, and it's the remake of Battlestar Galactica, and even that, I think, is more than 20 years old at this point. Get all up in there. And yeah, see that kind of that black showing through because the pink is a much lighter color, so it's not going to coat as thoroughly. But I think for what we're doing here, that's actually going to be a good effect. Still, we at least want a decent showing here. Get a good solid coating over that. I don't know if you can hear that, but outside my window there is a cricket that is very confused about what time of day it is. I'm never really sure what this microphone is picking up. I just got it. This is the first video I've done with it. And then I've got the gain on it turned up all the way because I want to be able to, speak in a fairly soft tone of voice, and also maybe help pick up the sound of the brush strokes, which is kind of a cool sound. If you're, if you're here for the ASMR aspect and not the miniatures painting aspect. But then I listened back to the playback to make sure everything went well, and I'm thinking, geez, do I really breathe that loudly? Nope, it's just the gain on the mic. All right. Got a pretty solid coverage there. All right, so we're gonna I'm going to give that some time to dry and see how it looks. But right now, I am fairly pleased with it. So we got a good solid covering with the pink, but we got enough of that black showing through that it's not going to be, it's not that super bright bubblegum pink. And I think that makes sense for for a critter's mouth like this. All right, so yeah, I think that was just a short little segment there. We hit a couple of things there, and it sounds like one of my neighbors is coming outside to have a conversation, so sure we don't want to listen to that, so I'm going to go ahead and pop this off for now. All right, we're back. So taking a look at what we did last time, I'm really pleased with how the mouth turns out. That light coat of pink over the black base, I think really worked. So I'm not gonna have to do anything more with that. And then looking at the base itself, I was originally planning on going back over that to give it a few little splashes with that chocolate sprinkle, but I'm not sure that's actually necessary. I think we've got some good shading and depth there with just the 2 layers, and a nice effect we've got here. Let's see if I can get a good angle on it. Yeah, you can kind of see it there. So the chocolate sprinkle has more of a glossy finish, so it kind of looks damp like mud, and then the chestnut has a much more matte finish, so it looks like dried dirt. So we got a good mix of effects there with the worm coming up out of the ground. And I think we've got a nice solid finish there. Maybe a little bit here, but I think it'll be all right. So that means that we still have to do a second coat on the belly, and then all of the spikes. That might need a second coat. I'm not sure on that. We'll have to get the first coat on to see. And then the teeth, that shouldn't take long. And then after that, it's just going to be a little bit of touch-up. Getting in, once we've painted the spikes, getting in around the base here and make sure that purple color is where it needs to be. So let's go ahead and grab a brush. We'll get started on the spikes here. Need something fairly small. Well, we're going to have to do touch-up anyway, so let's go something a little bit bigger here, just so we can get the spikes done somewhat quickly, because I think that is actually going to be the longest section here, just because there's so darn many of them things. All right, so we're getting back into our toasted marshmallow. Ooh, yellow. And that is exactly why I always try to tap it. There we go. All right. And again, with this first coat, since we know we're going to be doing some touch-up later, I'm not super worried about how neat this is going to be. We're just trying to get some paint on there. Let's see, I can put that somewhere a little easier to get to. That should work. Because I get the camera right here, and then the cord connecting it to the microphone right over there. So, got a lot of stuff here I'm trying to work around. All right. So another game I was running last night after I got done with this is my Daggerheart game. I've got, I think I mentioned earlier, I've got 3 separate games I'm running right now. Each one every 2 weeks, so they kind of roll over. There we go. Sorry, just minor little fold in the paper there. So So I've got one game of D&D 5th edition. That's the Discordance Overflow game that I mentioned. And then I've got a Daggerheart game, which you haven't played Daggerheart. It's a pretty good little system. It's the one that the Critical Role people came out with. And you can tell that they kept a lot of the core concepts from D&D, but just a lot of good little fixes, I think. The combat system is much more dynamic, a lot more fluid. There's just a lot of little quality of life kind of things. But anyway, so the Daggerheart game is called Children of the Dark Star, which I can say because they've recently found out that's the name of it. As they uncovered this cult they've been dealing with and finding out just how far it goes. So the game is set in the Kingdom of Damocin, which just recently went through a major civil war after the king and queen were slain, not leaving no clear heir. So, of course, the first thing everyone, all the other noble houses start doing is fighting over who gets to be in charge. And as it turns out, the answer was none of them, because there were just too many factions, too much war. No one really was able to come out on top. So now the Kingdom of Damocin is just a bunch of little baronies and city-states kind of sniping at each other. There's been a ceasefire for the last few years, as everyone's kind of pulled back and started, strengthening themselves and getting ready for what everyone perceives to be the next war that's coming. Because, of course, no one's gonna accept the idea that no one gets to be in charge. So everyone that's still, all the noble houses still capable of fighting, are gathering their strength and allies and preparing. Sure, you guys can see that. Yeah, and you can already see this color is coming in really nicely. You can compare it to the gray. Probably going to need a second coat on this, but it's looking good so far. Ah, goodness. So the game itself is set on a frontier region. They started off in a little village called Garensford, which is on a major river running through the region. And it didn't used to be a frontier city, but there's an elven nation, Galanis, directly to the west, right? Yeah, west of Damocin, and they used to control the whole area until the Nemean Empire came through a couple hundred years ago and pushed them out. And then Damocin was part of the Nemean Empire before it collapsed. And so the elves took advantage of the Civil War to reclaim some territory, which means they came in and killed a bunch of people, caused a whole bunch of devastation, basically wrecked the entire western half of Damocin while the noble houses were busy fighting each other. So Garensford is now pretty much the frontier. And the reason the elves stopped is because one of the player characters is an elf. Very specifically, he is the son. Well, he's the prince of the elves. I mean, let's not mince words there. He is the son of the current king and queen, and he had a religious conversion that made him realize, oh, wait a second, maybe killing these people is not a good thing. Maybe we shouldn't do that. And so he ran off, and so the elves were unwilling to continue the war until he'd been found, because they didn't want to risk him dying, obviously. Okay, I'm actually going to pause here for just a moment. Sorry for the brief pause there. But hopefully now I can stop sniffling into the microphone. Oh, but anyway, yeah. So Elven Prince realized, oh wait, are we the bad guys? And ran off. And he ended up in Garensford because it was the closest place. And then the other two characters, well, technically three characters, but we'll get into that in a second. So one of the characters is a clank, what the Daggerheart calls a clank, which is basically just a construct, kind of like a Warforged from D&D, if you're familiar with that, which is not normally something that I would have in my campaign world. But he had been looking through the Daggerheart stuff before we got together to play, and so he'd picked out a clank and he was really excited about it. He had a good concept, and I am a big believer that, having rules and guidelines for your campaign is good, but if the player has a really good concept, then rules, we're going to touch up anyway, so you can always modify things in service of a good story. Now if his story was just, hey, I want to be a robot ninja or something, that's not a good story. But he is an amnesiac assassin who was betrayed by his creator for reasons he does not know. Well, he's starting to learn them, but at the time he did not know. Because the fun thing about being an amnesiac is I get to make a whole bunch of decisions about your character for you. And you kind of, it's kind of part of the deal when you want to play an amnesiac character. You might have thoughts and suggestions, but ultimately, the DM is going to work your nonsense into the story in interesting ways. So we have an exiled elven prince. He's playing the elf is playing a seraph, which is basically a paladin, a holy warrior. And then the robot assassin is playing just an actual warrior. He's got some stealth and some tracking abilities, but he is primarily stabbing things real good. All right, let's see here. And then the third player started off playing a ranger. And I say started off because that character did not survive the first couple sessions. So if you hear anyone complaining that, Daggerheart isn't dangerous or potentially lethal, they are wrong. Because the party was in a pretty bad fight against a chimera that they'd gone and sort of lured out in the woods. And with Daggerheart, when you drop to 0 hit points, you can either just fall unconscious. The player gets the choice. You can either just fall unconscious, in which case you're kind of hanging out until someone heals you or the party gets a chance to do a rest. You can do what's called a Blaze of Glory, which is that you get one action, even when it's not your turn. You critically succeed on that action to the best extent that you could. And then your character dies. So, quite literally a blaze of glory. And then the third option, which is the most interesting, I think, is called Risk It All. You roll your dice. You have 2d12s that you use for most of the actions in Daggerheart. And if your hope die is higher, you spring back up with, you regain a certain number of hit points. And if your fear die is higher, you just die right then and there. And the party was in a pretty bad fight against the Chimera, and the Ranger went down, chose to risk it all, and it did not go well, obviously. At which point the rest of the party decided to retreat, and the Chimera flew off with the Ranger and had dinner. So his next character is a wizard from one of the noble houses, specifically one of the minor ones in the area, and he was away serving one of the greater houses that they were beholden to during the war. And when the war was over, he came back to discover that his home was completely abandoned. All of his people were gone, vanished, not killed. No sign of violence or anything. The only thing he found was a book in a language he did not understand sitting in the throne room. So he's been carrying that around trying to figure out what's going on. And so that is our group. We have Demetrius, the elven seraph. We have Ratch, the construct assassin. And then Quintilius, the human wizard. And they started off in the town of Garensford, which the main thing going on there is a dwarven cartel, I guess the best word is for it, maybe conglomerate, guild, not quite guild, guild's not the right word. Cartel is probably the right word. Recently came in with the intention of building a road from their hold up through Garensford and through the Wispwood to the north, because as it stands right now, the only trade road goes miles and miles and miles around the Wispwood, and then crosses the river at a place called North Edge, a couple days away. And it's very expensive to cross there because they don't have a bridge, they just have a ferry. So getting wagons and whatnot across, they charge a premium for because it's the only way across the river. So the dwarf plan was to come to this little bitty town in the middle of nowhere, build a bridge, and then carve their way through the Wispwood to make a trade road. And the players were originally hired to basically act as troubleshooters for that bridge, for that construction project, because the Wispwood's fairly dangerous. There's a reason people haven't tried to do this before. So their job is to be paying more attention to the camera and make sure I'm keeping all this in frame while I'm rambling. But yeah, so their job is to basically go into the Wispwood ahead of the construction teams and make sure that everything's copacetic, which is how they encountered that Chimera. That was a couple sessions in. Well, I will say they, on that topic, they almost died during the first session as well. 2 of the 3 of them ended up going down, and they chose the safe option of just fall unconscious, which is probably wise. But the initial adventure was that some force was attacking. Well, I should say force. Some unknown entities were attacking the workers in the night, attacking the camps. Fortunately, no one had been killed yet, but some people had been injured and some stuff had been wrecked. So they were sent out to go find out what was going on with that. I've been neglecting some of the interiors of the spikes here. And they go track that down, and they find it is a group of undead skeletal warriors, specifically dressed in the livery of one of the destroyed houses from the area. This is where it's going to get a little tricky, because that last spike is right up in there, and you can see there's already some brown from the base paint. From the paint down here is on that spike. So that is, we're going to need to go through, do some touch up on that. I'm going to need a smaller brush. Okay, so we're going to leave that for now. And when I probably go back to that when I do the teeth, because I'm going to need a smaller brush for that anyway. Okay, so that's one set of spikes down. So let's rotate this guy around and get started on the next set. So yeah, they go out into the woods, they backtrack the attackers, they find a group of undead skeletons that are dressed in the livery of one of the destroyed houses, which means they're somewhat recent. And they've backtracked that to this pool of weird purple goop out in the Wispwood that is being guarded by some sort of powerful spellcaster, who they fight a bunch of skeletons. They fight the caster. They managed to defeat him, although again, two of the three of them went down. So it was a pretty near thing. While he's unconscious, the elven seraph gets a vision from his deity, seeing other similar pools scattered throughout the area. Not like the Wispwood, but like the geographical area around Damison, including specifically one in Elven territory. So now with a little bit more information, or at least knowledge that something weird's going on, they go back to the dwarves. They tell them, hey, we got this thing. Dwarves say, all right, cool, you dealt with the immediate problem, thank you. Continue on with your job. They head back out into the Wispwood on patrol. That's when they run into the Chimera. That's when we get a new character. I actually missed quite a bit of purple on these little segments here. And I think it was, if I'm remembering correctly, this game's been running for about 8 months or so, so I may not remember all the details at this point as well as I should. But they are on the way back from fighting the Chimera the first time, when they encounter a very strange creature. There's a sudden like acoustic guitar riff in the middle of the woods, and a raccoon emerges, wearing a poofy swashbuckler shirt with a big oversized hat and a rapier, like a human-sized rapier being carried by a raccoon, who introduces himself as Juan Ramon Ortega Marquez III and demands to know what they're doing in his woods. As they introduce themselves and start talking to this guy, they find that he is in service to a local Fey Queen, specifically the Lady Clad in Autumn's Veil is her name. And as they are in her territory, he wishes to know what they are doing, why they are here. So that starts a whole conversation. And he invites them back to his lady's court. So Heck. Well, that's the problem with doing the spikes is they're kind of everywhere. All right, I'm going to have to start gripping on the base here so that I don't get any more paint on my hands. So yeah, Juan invites them back to his lady's court. Let's do a little bit of touch up there where I grabbed the spikes accidentally. And so they go visit the lady, this fey court. They meet the lady clad in Autumn's veil. She is not particularly pleased about the idea of dwarves building a road through her woods. But she's willing to meet the... okay, these spikes are going to be a little hard to paint where you can actually see what I'm doing. So hopefully my story is interesting enough when my painting is not. But yeah. So yeah, she's not too thrilled with the idea of the dwarves building a road through her woods, but she is willing to work with them if the players can deal with a hag that has been plaguing her kingdom for a while. So the way the Wistwood is set up, it's just a rough ovoid. And, Garensford is down here at the base, and then they're trying to build a road up through the Wistwood, and the Fey Court is over on this half, and the Hag is over on this half. So the road is basically going straight to the middle of a war zone. They hadn't even realized it. Where were we? Oh, well, there we go. So, with that information, they return to the dwarves once again. And the dwarves' attitude is, do whatever you need to do to get this project, still on, keep this project on track. If that means we're going to make a deal with this Fae and go kill a hag, cool. If that means that, we just need to remove the Fae from the situation, that's also acceptable. So the dwarves don't really have a moral stance. They just want their business to continue. Alright, I think we got that second set of spikes done. And the underside, the underside was already kind of painted because we got that when we did the belly. So we just got this ridge here now. So with that, the party left Garensford with the intention of traveling north around the Wistwood to a place called Zetherin, which is it was a giant library and city of learning under the Kingdom of Damison. Since the Civil War, it has turned into its own little hold. It was taken over by someone calling himself the Dominus, and people know very little about him because he's very secretive but very powerful. He basically just took the city under his protection, quote unquote, set up his base of operations there. And a lot of refugees from the war have actually moved to Zetherin because it is extremely safe. Whatever else you might think about the situation, the Dominus makes sure that no one messes with Zetherin. So the population of the city has expanded significantly in the last couple of years. But in order to get there, of course, they have to go around the Wistwood because the road's not built yet, and they don't want to have to just hack their way through the wilderness. So they choose to take the long way around on the road. They head out to towards North Edge, the next city up the river. Along the way, they get ambushed by a group of cultists. And after they drive them off, well, actually, I think they just killed them all. None of the cultists got away. But after they kill them all, the elf, Dimitri, recognizes one of the amulets that one of them was wearing as an amulet of Set, which is in an old cult. So I've got my campaign setting mostly uses the, well, okay, hang on, I'm getting ahead of myself. So in my campaign setting, the primary deities are the Nemean pantheon. So the Nemean Empire controlled pretty much the whole known world for centuries, up until about 300 years ago, and they just vanished. All contact with Nemea was lost. No more ships showed up. Any attempts to contact or communicate with them was ineffective. So no one knows what happened. It's just it's an event referred to as the Silence. Right about 300 years ago, contact with the Empire was lost, so all of their holdings and little colonies had to fend for themselves, and civilization's been sort of slowly collapsing ever since. So the primary pantheon, for the humans at least, and a lot of the non-human races that were sort of absorbed by the Nemean Empire during their expansion, those are the Nemean deities are the primary ones. And that's a modified version of the Greyhawk pantheon, if you're familiar with that. Because I started playing during 3rd edition, and that's what the default deities in the player's handbook were, so those are the ones I was most familiar with. So when it came time to create my own pantheon, I just adapted that. So I tell you all that to let you know that the cult of Set is not a standard religion. So it's specifically Set is a leftover deity from something called the Ebon Dynasty, E-B-O-N, like the ebony, the color black. The Ebon Dynasty is from thousands of years ago, well before the Nemean Empire. And it was a kingdom that conquered and enslaved everyone they came across, using dark magics and evil pacts with beings from beyond time and space, that kind of stuff. So a cult of one of their gods is bad news. Let's see. Let's get in on this spike here. It's a little difficult to wriggle in here, so I'll focus on that for a second, then get back to the story in a moment. All right, there we go. Okay, I think we have that first coat on all the spikes, and that's looking pretty solid. So let's go ahead and do another layer on the belly while we're here, and we've got the brush and the toasted marshmallow out. Oh, but yeah, so he recognized the amulet as something belonging to the cult of Set. And I'm not just using the Egyptian deities for the Ebon Dynasty, but we'll get to that in a moment. So they decide to backtrack this cult, the ones that attacked them, figure out where they came from. So they head off the road for a little bit. They find an old abandoned wreck, or ruin rather, about a day or so's travel. And they go check that out. They end up infiltrating it, getting the drop on the sentry outside. And they question him. They find out that the the cultists that attacked them were specifically sent out to find them. This wasn't just some random roadside ambush. They were being targeted, but the sentry didn't know why. So they go deeper in. They fight some more cultists. They get down into the bottom of this ruin, and they find the head priest is engaged in some kind of ritual, communing with beings from beyond. They fight him. He almost kicks the crap out of them. That was a pretty tough fight. I remember that. That was good. I enjoyed that one. As a DM, I consider a combat successful if the players are not sure if they're going to win or not. That means I have done a good job of calibrating the level of danger. Anyway, so they wipe out this cult. They don't really get any more information, unfortunately. So they get back on the road. They start heading back to. They start getting on the road back to North Edge. Back on the road to North Edge, I suppose I should say. They haven't been North Edge yet. As they're going, Dimitri, the paladin, Seraph, whatever, decides he's going to start sort of meditating on the amulet he found and trying to connect with his goddess to find out what's up with this, see if he can glean any more information. And with some pretty good rolls over the course of a couple days, he does manage to have several visions of his goddess along with other deities battling Set and the deities of the Nemean Empire and defeating them. And he specifically realized that he specifically discovered that the pool of gunk that they'd found in the Wispwood appeared to be divine ichor of sorts. It was the blood of Set that was sort of seeping up from underground. So they slowly getting more information about the situation. They get to North Edge, which is a sort of a not ramshackle town. It's a little rough around the edges, let's say, because the guy in charge of it styled himself a baron, which Quintilius the wizard took great offense to, being an actual noble. But the guy in charge of North Edge is actually a soldier from the war. He belonged to one of the houses that got destroyed. And when that happened, he decided, you know what? Why are we bothering? Oh, shoot, I gotta hit these little spikes coming off his chin. I missed those earlier. He decided, you know what? Why are we fighting for other people when we could just take over this town and run it ourselves? And so he and his troops did exactly that. They just took over North Edge because there was no one to stop them. And now they run it. And they've been making a pretty good living for themselves off those ferry tolls that I mentioned earlier. And as I said, Quintilius took offense to that. What's that? That I think it's Michael Jordan meme, and I took that personally. That was pretty much Quintilius. But they ended up talking to the Baron, seeing what was going on around here, what kind of anything they could help out with, anything they could get paid to do, since they are wandering adventurers and money is an issue for them. The Baron tried to talk them into going and taking out some Dragonborn smugglers that were camped on the river just outside of town. And the characters decided they were going to go check that out. Decided they liked the smugglers better than they liked the Baron. So they figured they were going to just lie to the Baron and say they killed him and try to get the reward, which obviously that didn't work out very well. It's actually kind of funny, and I'll be spoiling a little bit of this if any of them are watching. They came back into town intending to try to deceive the Baron into getting their reward, and they found that the Baron's right-hand woman, his lieutenant, and a bunch of soldiers were waiting for them. And so they assumed that, okay, the Baron was planning on double-crossing us this whole time, so we feel completely justified in taking these folks out. And the funny part is they didn't realize they'd been tailed the whole time. So the Baron, the Baron knew that they hadn't, that they were trying to double-cross him, and so that he just sent his soldiers to go deal with them, figuring, okay, if we can't do business, then you're of no use to me. So both, it was sort of a mutual double-cross that resulted in combat in the middle of the town street here, very Wild West showdown, which the players won rather handily because these were basically just a bunch of jumped up brigands. I mean, they were no serious threat to the player characters at this point. But in the middle of this fight, this cloaked figure starts walking down the street, and as he walks past one of the soldiers who's trying to flee, just sort of casually decapitates the guy, and his cloak falls back, and he is revealed to be an elf that Demetrius recognizes as one of his parents' sort of chief enforcers, a guy who is extremely dangerous. They make a brief effort to fight him, and he smacks the heck out of them without even really trying. So at that point, they decide to run, which led to a sort of desperate chase out into the wilderness where they were finally able to give the guy the slip. That is one of the things I like about Daggerheart. It took the skill challenge idea from 4th edition D&D, if you're familiar with that. And if you're not, you should go check it out. Matt Colville's got a great video on it. Matt Colville has a great video on pretty much everything. But the skill challenge mechanic is something I incorporated into my 5th ed D&D games a long time ago because it's fantastic. It's a really good way to handle challenges that are not combat-based. And I utilize them quite frequently. But yeah, so they give the elf Aeolus, they give him the slip. They double back to North Edge. They get on the ferry across the river. They plant some information with some of the locals, being deliberately overheard in their conversations, to give the idea that they're going to head east towards a city called Deephaven on the coast, when in fact they're heading north to Zethrin, hoping that that's going to throw Aeolus off their trail for even longer. And that, I think, is where we're going to pause for the moment. Well, no, I guess we got some more belly we can paint here. Again, trying to get into this little fold here is kind of a pain because if either I can see it or I can show it to the camera. I can't really do both, so I don't know how great of a video that's going to make for. Yeah, I think I'll just go ahead and leave it there for now and let that dry. But you can see how that toasted marshmallow color works. It looks really good for the spikes. It's just great. I love this. I love this particular paint. It's good for bone and horn and all kinds of stuff where you want it to be, sort of an off-white without being like, clean and eggshell. So yeah, we'll go ahead and call that there, let that dry, and we'll get back to it later. All right, and we're back. Got that first coat on the spikes nice and dry, and it's coming along pretty well, I think. But as you can see here, we definitely have some of that gray still showing through, so gonna need a second coat on that. So we'll go ahead and give that a quick once over. Shouldn't take too long to get another coat on there. To bubble up on us a little bit there. Yeah. There we go. All right. So, if I remember correctly, it's been a couple of days from my perspective. I realize that from your perspective, it's been about 5 minutes. We were talking about the Daggerheart game, Children of the Dark Star, and I was just given a kind of a basic synopsis of the campaign so far. And I think they had just left the city of North Edge after getting into a squabble with some of the local guards, such as they were, and an elf that was looking for Demetrius. They managed to escape. They got on the road going out of North Edge up towards Zethrin, the library city. And along the way, they didn't have any encounters. It was a couple days' travel, but they did take some more time to examine that amulet they found from the cult of Set. As well, Ratch had begun having some flashbacks. He was slowly starting to remember bits and pieces from his former life. Specifically, he got a memory of running through a ruined city, being pursued by mages of some kind. He was getting blasts coming at him from wands and whatnot, carrying a young tiefling girl with him, about 7 or 8. Obviously, trying to protect her from whoever these people were. So he's still trying to piece that together and figure out what it means. But it seems to have something to do with why his creator turned on him and tried to have him, put down. Meanwhile, Demetrius has been further examining that amulet from Set, and got another vision from his goddess. So Daggerheart has downtime activities you can do during respites, or not respites, but rest activities. You can craft stuff, you can work on projects, that kind of thing. And so he's been using his downtime activities to try to further study that thing and see what insights he can glean from it. And so he got another vision from his goddess. This one, he saw a collection of the Nemean deities, or not the Nemean deities, the Ebon Dynasty gods, sort of arrayed around a ziggurat. Oh, hello. One of those stair-step pyramids like the Mayans used. He saw a whole bunch of them arrayed around the ziggurat under an alien sky. And three of the beings specifically, am I putting, yeah, okay, I gotta be more careful when I'm holding that thing. Three of the beings specifically seem to be highlighted in this vision. One that he recognized as Set. Another was a sort of a landworm, a giant serpentine creature with legs. And the third was some kind of aquatic tentacled monster. So they've been slowly finding out more about this as they've been going. But a few days pass, they reach the city of Zetherin, which is basically two cities at this point, because there's the original city where the library was, and the schools. But then, since the war, so many refugees have been moving here, they've kind of built up a much newer, a little less fancy city outside of it. Not quite a slum, but not, obviously not in great shape just because of the speed and necessity of the construction. So they get into Zetherin. The first thing they notice is that the inner city is guarded by giant magical constructs, about 10 to 12 feet tall, appear to be autonomous, very heavily armed and armored, and with a striking similarity to Ratch's construction, although he's a lot more small and he's human-sized, and these things are, ogre-sized. So that raises more questions. He tries to discreetly inquire with some of the guards, but doesn't manage to find out too much, because they're not, we're just going to start talking about stuff like that to any random outsider that walks up to them. I'm hoping that second coat's going to go on there a little bit better once it dries. I'd hate to have to do a third one. This video is already, or this project, well, I suppose the video as well, the project's already running a bit longer than I was thinking it was going to. Because we're already past the 2-hour mark. But they get into the inner city, now seeing these constructs that they have some questions about. And they head into, Quintilius and Dimitri head to the library to try to do some research. Because they wanted, the reason they came to Zetherin in the first place is they wanted to find out more about hags before they went and fought one. So they head to the library to do some research. Ratch decides he's going to go wander around town and see if he can get some questions of his own answered. And Ratch's player had to miss a session, so that was the other reason why we kind of split off. But I managed to leave them on a pretty good cliffhanger, because the session before the session that Ratch's player was going to miss. So like the last session he was going to have before he skipped one. He was hanging out with a local tinker that he'd been buddying up with and helping with projects and getting some materials for projects of his own. And as he was hanging out there, it was getting on evening, and he heard someone creeping around outside, so we went to go check that out. And he confronts a shadowy figure in the alleyway who says to him, "Well, you're as sharp as ever. Been a long time, Ratch. And that was where we ended the session, with him encountering this person from his past whom he did not remember. So that was a nice little dramatic point to end at, I thought. You know, he was a little frustrated about it, but not in a bad way, like a, you know, hey, I can't wait to find out what happens kind of way, which I think is the sweet spot there. Let's see. But then the next session was focused on Demetrius and Quintilius going to the library, which doesn't sound nearly as dramatic when you just say it. But they were doing some research on hags, and a couple of interesting things happened there. First off, that book that Quintilius found in his home in the throne room, the one he couldn't read, he took that to one of the local sages there in the library, trying to find out, hey, what is this thing? What gives here? And while he was talking to the guy and showed him the book, he noticed the sage made some kind of magical sign, and almost immediately thereafter, several other wizards came into the room, little suspiciously, and they explained to Quint that this book was the Codex Tenebris, which was an extremely powerful and old book of shadow magic, and that it had been stolen from the library in Zethrin several months prior. So they were very curious to find out where he got it and why he had it. And of course, he told them. He explained the situation, and they believed him. So he was just as I'm gonna need a smaller brush to get in there and get that one. That's kind of a pain. I'm already gonna have to go through and touch up those rocks as well. But anyway, yeah, so Quint didn't know anything about it, and he explained that to them, and they accepted his explanation. Of course, they took the book back. You can't just leave something like that lying around. But he was able to find out from them that one of the main things that book is for is opening portals into the Shadowfell, the sort of dark reflection of the material plane. So Quintilius now suspects that his people have been teleported away, shifted into another reality, sort of. So he has to figure out a way to get to the Shadowfell to rescue them. And he does not have access to that book that might have told him how. And then the other thing that happened, because Demetrius isn't much of a scholar, so he's not really doing much in the way of research, but he's just kind of fetching stuff for Quintilius and helping him locate things in the library. He encounters a young, well-dressed human woman who kind of looks at him somewhat askance, and Demetrius just assumes that he was accidentally being rude without realizing it. She goes off on her business, and nope. Okay, well, I accidentally got some paint on the teeth there, but that's okay because we have to paint that in the same color anyway. So it was not an accident; it was foreplanning. That's my story. I'm gonna stick with that. Anyway, fast forward a couple hours, they get done with their research for the day at the library, and they head back to their inn. And in the middle of the night, they get attacked by several masked individuals who are not particularly well armed and not especially good at violence. Even just the two of them, Quint and Demetrius, pretty handily thrash the group. But as they're trying to figure out what's going on, the woman from the library shows up, casts a spell, puts them both to sleep. So they wake up, tied to a couple of chairs in a basement somewhere, with this woman demanding to know why they're in Zethrin and who they're working for, which is confusing to them because they didn't think they were working for anyone. They manage to have a conversation with her. They talk her down a little bit, and they find out that her name is Lady Raquel, and she is the last surviving member of House Nissen, which is one of the houses in the western end of Damocin that got wrecked by the elves. So she saw Demetrius there and assumed that he was up to something. And he tried very hard to convince her that he was a nice elf. And with some good rolls and invoking his deity, he managed to convince her that he was not a threat. And the fact that he was there with Quintilius and he was a noble that had met Lady Raquel previously, not in any major capacity, just kind of a saw you at an official function kind of thing. So they managed to talk her down from, just killing them and dumping their bodies in the river. And she told them that there was an elven emissary that was in the city for unknown reasons. But that the reason that she was here had nothing to do with that. She was trying to convince Zethrin to offer aid to the refugees. So the refugees from the western end of Damocin that had been destroyed by the elves had sort of regrouped in a place called the Barristan Holds, which was currently the front line against the elven invasion, or at least it was until they stopped, which no one outside of the elves knows why they did. So they're all just the humans are all just kind of braced and waiting for things to heat up again. So Lady Raquel came to Zethrin to try to convince the Dominus to get involved, but so far she hasn't even been able to get an audience with the guy. Hasn't been able to get in the front door. So Quintilius offered to help with that as part of the hey, we're cool, please don't kill us kind of negotiation. Okay, so that should be all that. Yeah, we still got some gray showing through over here. I'm going to do that at least once per segment here, I'm sure. So, at that point, the group reunited. Well, no, hang on. The players reunited. Ratchet's player came back for the next session. And he discovered that the person in the alleyway is a man named Malcolm that he'd worked with before. And his tiefling partner, a woman named Ace, so named because she's got like a birthmark over her eye that's in the shape of a spade. All right, now we got that inside, so now we just... Yeah, okay, that's the side we gotta hit again. And they weren't even looking for him. They just kind of saw him randomly as they were going about their business. They were just kind of freelancers. But they'd worked with him in the past during the war. And of course, they were talking to him, like they knew him, and he didn't remember much of anything about them. So we kind of managed to piece together some info from them, and realized that the last time he had seen them was on a mission in the capital, which has now been pretty much wrecked due to the Civil War. And Ace told him, "Don't worry, the girl is safe," which he was confused about. He kind of pried in a little bit, trying to... He was fairly upfront about the fact that he couldn't remember things, so it wasn't too much of an issue. But they didn't know much about the situation either. All they knew was that Ratch had brought this girl to them and asked for their help in keeping her safe. It was he did find out the girl's name was Jaina, but Malcolm told him that the girl was safe, that he'd brought her further north to some of his contacts in the Orc tribes in the steppes. So she was very far removed from civilization, but very far removed from anyone who might be trying to find her. And again, Ratch still doesn't even remember who this girl is or why she's important. But he at least knows that she's safe. And these little ones in here are going to be a pain to get to, just from that angle. Also kind of hard to paint them and show them to you at the same time. So at this point, the characters are reunited. Because Demetrius wanted to try to sneak in to the sort of inner sanctum of the library, to where the get... Well, no, hang on, I skipped a part. Yeah, because first they went to go talk to the Dominus with Lady Raquel. They didn't get to talk to him, but they got to talk to his major domo, who was very interested in Demetrius's presence and seemed to recognize him, or at least had heard of him, which made him a little suspicious, a little concerned about the elven envoy that was there. They did, however, agree to at least consider Lady Raquel's proposal. So she at least got a meeting to present her case and ask for help. And they found out a little bit more about that elven emissary, who's apparently someone rather important. Let's get in over here real quick. But at that point, Demetrius decided he wanted to sneak into where the guest quarters were in Zethrin and deal with that situation, because he was concerned, rightfully so, that if she found out that he'd been here, then the elves would know where he was. So he and Ratch... So Quintilius was creating a distraction for them. That evening, they went back into the library itself. Quintilius created a distraction so that Ratch and Demetrius could sneak into the inner, the sort of inner sanctum of the library. And that was a pretty, yeah, that's looking good. I need to do a little bit of touch up there, but there's a whole bunch of little spots there we're going to need to get in with the purple and cover up on. I think those spikes are looking pretty good overall. Should be able to make do with just that second coat. Oh wow, this is some gray in here we missed with the purple originally. Oh, I'm nowhere near the camera. Sorry about that. But yeah, you can see I missed some of the base plastic there. Well, just have to give that a more thorough once over. Yeah, I'm going to leave those spikes to dry. So we'll get back to that later, and I will continue the story of Ratch and Demetrius sneaking into the library. Alright, give the spikes some time to dry. I don't think they're quite done yet, but we're not going to be working on them for this next section anyway, so it doesn't really matter. Grab one of these tiny little brushes, because we've got some detail work here we've been putting off. Alright, for this we should just need the cap here. That should be plenty of paint. Alright, so yeah, we're going to get on these teeth and get these little spikes down here by the base that I keep saying, oh, we'll get back to that later. Well, it's later. Ratch and Demetrius were sneaking into the inner sanctum. This is, yeah, these teeth are tiny little things here. Yeah, they're sneaking into the inner sanctum of the library. And this was one of those times I used the Daggerheart Skills Challenge system, which I do enjoy. And one of the things I really like about it is, so Daggerheart uses 2 die 12, and it's pretty similar to D&D. You roll your 2 die 12s, you add them together, you add your stat modifier, and that's your total. But one of the d12s is your hope die, the other one is your fear die, and depending on which one rolls higher, affects the outcome. So you would say, I got a 12 with hope, or I got a 15 with fear. And even if you succeed or fail, the hope or fear could have an effect. So, for example, you could fail a roll, but if you roll hope, you still gain some kind of advantage. Or if you succeed with fear, there's some kind of drawback associated with your success. Which makes these sorts of skill challenges fun, because instead of just being a pass-fail kind of thing, I can track both successes and every time they roll fear. So I've got one die that's ticking up whenever they succeed on a roll, and one die that's ticking up every time they roll fear. And whatever happens first sort of dictates what goes on there. In this example, because they're trying to sneak in someplace, whenever they would roll fear, the detection die would roll up. So they were getting closer to alerting security to their presence and being caught while infiltrating. And they rolled really well, but they rolled a lot of fear while they were trying to creep through the inner sanctum. So we had a very fun interaction where they got the last success they needed on the same roll, and they got the last fear they needed to set off security. So they literally got to the guest quarters, to the room with the woman they're looking for, at the same time that one of those giant security droids comes around the corner and runs straight into them. So we have the start of combat at the exact same time that they got to where they were trying to infiltrate to. And those security constructs are no joke. So it starts combat, tries to start attacking them. They basically just say, screw it, let's do what we came here to do. So Ratch drops a smoke bomb. Demetrius goes charging into the room, and he recognizes the elven woman in there. She's an emissary for the elven nation, but she's more of a spy, really, than a proper diplomat. a Mata Hari kind of spy, not a Black Widow kind of spy. So she's not a combatant at all. So he goes charging in, grabs her in a headlock before she can try to get away. And she, she's trying to play it cool because she realizes, she's not gonna win a wrestling match with him. So she's just trying to de-escalate the situation. She says, "Oh, well, Prince Dimitri, your parents have been quite worried about you." And he says, he tells her, I'm not going back. And she says, "Oh, okay, I will make sure to relay that to your parents next time I see them." And he delivered one of the coldest lines I have ever seen in an RPG. And she says, "Oh, I'll tell them that next time I see them." And he says, "Oh, you're not going back either," and just chucks her straight out the window, like from a fourth story floor or fourth floor out the window, falls to her death. Ratch and the security droid's still outside, or security construct's still outside. So Ratch and Dimitri go out the window. Ratch he's got a grappler built into his arm. So he repels them down safely right next to the body of the woman that Dimitri just chucked out of the window. At this point, the entire place is on full alert. So alarms are going off. Those security constructs are running around. So then it's another skill challenge to get the heck out of there without starting a fight, which they also succeed on just barely. Meanwhile, Quint's back out in the library wondering what the heck just happened. But he has a spell that allows him to disguise his appearance magically, so he doesn't care. He just changes his face and walks out of the city like nothing even happened. Meanwhile, Ratch and Dimitri are running their asses off trying to escape before they get caught. Yeah, I think that looks pretty good. Probably won't even need a second coat on those. And we might want to go over them a little bit just to make sure. There we go. I had a random brush hair caught on the teeth there. Alright, so we got that. Let's get down in here and fix up these spikes next to the ground. So yeah, mad dash to escape the city with security constructs and guards on high alert now. Oh, shoot, I realized I forgot some important details there. So something else that Malcolm and Ace were able... It would help if I had the darn thing on camera. I keep pulling it up here so I can see it better, but if I put it there, you can't see it. Something else Malcolm and Ace had told Ratch is that Weimar, his creator, was operating out of Zethrin, and apparently had gotten in pretty good with the Dominus. So Ratch was wanting to find out some more information regarding that. So while they were dealing with the elf, Ace volunteered to try to sneak in and see if she could gather some intel on what Weimar was up to. And she was a little bit more subtle than they were. She also didn't throw anyone out a window, so that helped. So they managed to escape the city. They meet back up with Quint and Malcolm and Ace. And Ace tells Ratch that Weimar wasn't in the city at the time. He was gone. But she did manage to find a letter that had been sent to him from someone named Roxy that he did not recognize. But it indicated that Roxy had discovered Ratch was still alive, and specifically referenced What was the exact phrasing? Let me see if I can remember it. It looks like Dagon's followers didn't put your wayward son down as hard as they thought they had, which opened up a new dimension to this mystery. I don't know why I'm just randomly poking at these spikes here. And the letter was signed with a symbol that Ratch recognized from one of his flashbacks, because the wizards who had been trying to kill him while he was escaping with the tiefling were wearing the same symbol. So the plot thickens once again. Do I have any other little touch-ups here I need to do with this color while I've got it? Maybe take another swipe at some of this. See if we can... I really like to avoid having to do a third pass at those spikes, but some of them look like they didn't take very well. So, they've got some more information now, although they're not in Zetherin. But they do know that there is some deeper conspiracy going on. And they ended up, they leave Zetherin, they start heading west, so they're now north of the Wispwood. Because they had to loop all the way around to get to Zetherin, because that's actually where the Dwarven Road is going to be going once it's done. But they're traveling with Malcolm and Ace, because they're actually on a job. They were traveling to the ruins of Ordhall, which is the capital of one of the houses that got destroyed in the Civil War. So they're going there looking for something. Party decides to accompany them. Both because they don't have anything else going on right that second, and because Ratch felt like he kind of owed Ace for risking herself going in and finding that information. So they decided to help them out as sort of repayment for that. Let's see, I guess what else we can do here for this section. Go ahead and grab another small brush in the brown, and we'll go ahead and touch up the base there, because I think that is all the work we're going to have to do down there with the phooey. I say that, and then I immediately notice some more spots here I got to paint. Again, trying to keep that in frame. All right, let's see if those teeth are dry enough that we can go back over them with another coat real quick. As long as I got the little brush out. Oh, but they go to the ruins of Ordhall. They have some encounters along the way. They find these creepy tribal people out in the woods somewhere. Not the Wispwood. Another set of forests to the north. So they run into some creepy savages out in the wilderness. They get to Ordhall. They fight some ghosts. They find some cultists that are in the ruins. The ghosts, this is actually pretty clever on Quintilius's part. The ghosts are soldiers from the war that are still trying to defend their fallen home. And Quint managed to convince them that the cultists were actually the invaders, and so they ended up using the ghost to wipe out a whole hallway full of these guys, save themselves a pretty big battle there. So that was pretty clever. I enjoy when players think out of the box like that. But so they go in the ruins. They find what Malcolm and Ace were looking for, and they head back out. And then they head south towards the Wispwood, while Malcolm and Ace go back to turn in their job, get rewarded. They've decided to now return to the Wispwood to deal with the hag. There we go. Nice toothy maw, as the saying goes. All right, so I'm going to put that down for now, and we'll do some touch up on the base for this section. And then I think the only thing we have left to do is just do the purple touch up. Make sure we've got all that covered, and then we are just about done. All right, so let's use, I think I'll just use the chocolate sprinkle to cover that. Since it's darker, it should cover more thoroughly, more easily. But yeah, so they head into the Wispwood to deal with the hag, and they decide they're going to try the diplomatic approach to start with, because they're still not entirely convinced whose side of this fight they should be on. So they head into the hag's territory, and they find that she's got this great big nasty looking tree that she's built up as her base of operations. Sort of twisted, and this is giving us a good opportunity to add some more highlights and shading down to that base anyway. So good choice on the color. So yeah, they head in. Heck, let's just phooey. It's all right. It's just a little bit of weathering there. It's hardly even noticeable. And again, the thing just came up out of the ground, so if he's got some specks of brown on the worm itself, it's not that big of a deal. All right, hang on. This is going to take some focus because this part is really uptight near the near that spike. So I'm gonna. All right, so we got a little bit of overlap there, but again, I don't think it'll really be that noticeable. And even if it is, I don't think it's a big deal. Otherwise, you could go back and forth forever, switching between paints to do touch up anytime you get a little too much on there. But anyway, they just approached this hag's tree in peace, and she's got goblins kind of hanging out in her territory. So they're being shadowed, but they're not being attacked as they approach. And the hag's perfectly willing to talk to them. And hags are usually willing to be friendly if they think they can cut a deal with you. So she invites them in, and she's shapeshifted to look like this sweet old lady. She invites them into this nice little drawing room. She offers them tea. Demetrius politely declines, but Quintilius does not. He accepts her hospitality. Oh yeah, I'm really liking that the shading effect we're getting with those two different brown colors there. It's looking good. Let's do a quick spin around here. See if there's any other areas I need to touch up with the brown. It does not look, maybe a little bit in there. Anyway, she invites them in, gives them tea. They just address the problem directly, like, hey, the lady clad in Autumn's veil wants an end to hostilities here. As long as we got this here, I suppose we'll throw a little bit more shading on the rocks. But yeah, I think we're probably good on that. And the hag actually offers them a peace treaty to sign with the Fey Queen. And they think about that, and she offers them deals, obviously, including the offering to give Ratch his memories back. And as a token to prove that she can do that, she gives him another vision of running through that city with the tiefling girl, and specifically like passing her off to Ace. So confirming what he'd already discovered. And they give it some thought. They say they will take the information to the Fey Queen and see what she has to say. But then, after they leave, they camp for the night out in the forest. They talk it over, and they decide that, this is probably not a good idea. Fey Queen's probably not going to go for it. And even if she does, how can we trust the hag to keep her into the bargain? So they decide they're just going to go back and take her out. And that's where we'll pick up next time with the purple touch-up, once everything else is dry. All right. This should be the last section we need to do here, because this, I think we just have the purple touch-up to do now, which is good, because I was originally planning this project only be about 2 hours, maybe 2:15. We're already pushing 3, so hopefully this will be the last segment we need to do. All right. So taking a look here, yeah, we got a little bit up top here, but I think the most of the touch-up we're going to need to do is going to be around the sides of the spikes. This center ridge, I think, is in pretty good shape already. But let's get to it. So they had decided to go ahead and take care of the hag. And they weren't that far from her territory at that point, because they just left long enough to camp for the night and debate what to do. So they went back and pretty much just went full frontal assault. She had hordes of goblins hanging out outside, but they're high enough level that Quintilius has Fireball, so that did not slow them down in the slightest. He's also got this wand he took off some of the cultists they were fighting. It's a Primal Obsidian, which gives him damage bonuses on fire spells. So yeah, the goblins outside did not give them any real issues. So they bust into the hag's lair. They immediately run into a bit of a problem because the drawing room they were in earlier is the only room in this place they've seen, and it appeared to be a dead end until they started poking around and realized that the whole place was glamored, and that there was a door on the far side. But there was a teleportation trap that they almost ran into. I think Ratch just barely spotted it as they were approaching. But they managed to bypass that because he noticed it, fortunately. And there were a few other traps and combats and tricks she had set up for unwelcome visitors. Got a couple little random spots here to. Yep, there we go. I'm just going to focus on this center ridge first, and then we'll come back and start looking at some of the other ones. But they finally got down into the depths of her lair to confront her. They discovered that not only is this a hag, she's also a Gorgon. And I'm going to be a mythology snob for just a moment here, because D&D calls these creatures Medusas, the women with the snakes for hair that turn you into stone. And that is not what that is. Medusa, so the Gorgons in Greek mythology are the snake-haired women who turn you into stone. Medusa was the name of a specific Gorgon. That's something that's always irritated me slightly about modern fantasy. I don't know how that got mixed up, but it has persisted, and I don't like it. So she is a Gorgon. Actually, if I remember correctly, I think Daggerheart actually has that listed correctly. I'd have to go back and look. I've been learning so many new systems in the last year or so that I have multiple different rule sets in my head that are all similar enough that I sometimes get them overlapped. Because D&D, Daggerheart, Draw Steel, they all use the same basic stats, but they all call them something slightly different. So it's just different enough to be confusing sometimes. Anyway, so she's a Gorgon on top of being a hag. So big battle starts. Ratch runs up into melee with her, and immediately gets hit with her stone gaze, which every time it starts a countdown timer basically on him, and every time she gets attacked, it goes down by 1. And I think he had an initial saving throw to avoid the effect, which he failed. So he was slowly getting petrified. And then she hit them with basically a dream battle fight where they all kind of got zapped into their own little mindscapes. And Demetrius was attacking a village of goblins, which he defeated rather handily. And when he defeated them, the illusion kind of fell away, and he was looking at the remains of a village that he had slaughtered before he, back in the days before he came to his senses and ran away from his people. Quintilius was in his abandoned home, fighting shadowed monsters, and then in the throne room, he confronted some sort of dark mage that was standing before the throne with these huge glowing serpentine eyes in the darkness behind it. And when he defeated that, the hood of the mage fell away, revealing his younger sister, who he had not heard from in some time. Oh, well, as long as I'm there, I'll go ahead and slap that. That's going to be the major part there. And then Ratch was fighting what appeared to be a witch and a large armored figure. And when he defeated them, first off, as he was fighting them, the armored figure, he was attacking the witch, and the armored figure sacrificed himself to protect her, like, threw himself in the way of Ratch's sword. And then when they died, the illusion faded and revealed a human man and woman of dressed very finely in a what was obviously like a castle or some sort of manor house, and hiding a short distance away was a young tiefling girl that Ratch recognized as Jaina. So once they'd all completed their respective dream battles, they snapped back to reality. Oh, there goes gravity. And basically got back into the fight with the hag. And at that point, it was, well, I won't say it was easy because she hit like a truck. And as I said, Ratch almost got petrified. But they did manage to defeat her. There we go. And they found some pretty good treasure in her hoard. Daggerheart has some really fun treasure tables you can roll on. So they defeated her, and Quintilius had inadvertently set her tree on fire earlier with some of his fireballs. I say inadvertently. He wasn't attempting to set the tree on fire, but he was using fire around a tree, so these things happen. But yeah, so they defeated... that just doesn't want to stay still. They defeated the hag and drove off her minions and set her tree on fire. So they returned triumphantly to the lady clad in Autumn's veil and let her know the good news. She was very pleased to hear that. And she agreed to hold up her end of the bargain. So the dwarves are going to angle their road to go around her territory, but in exchange, she is going to use her magic to smooth their way a little bit, make it easier for them to get through and clear space that they need. So with that, their primary objective that they'd had for a little bit was taken care of. At which point, they decided they were going to go deal with some personal business. So during his research, Quintilius had discovered that trying to organize my thoughts more properly. I think I might have to start using the bottle here. I'm running out of paint in the cap. Tace had discovered that the simplest way to get to the Shadowfell was probably going to be to find ruins of the Ebon dynasty, because they were renowned for their use of such dark magics and their connection to the Shadowfell. And the easiest place to find ruins of the Ebon dynasty is the desert of Kadasha, which is south from Damison over the Serpent Spine Mountains. Oop, that's way too much paint. And so Quint wanted to travel south to Kadasha to try to find some way of getting into the Shadowfell to rescue his people. And Demetrius, of course, is interested in dealing with that situation because of the connection with Set and the other Ebon gods that he saw in his vision. And Ratch headed south with them because in order to get to Kadasha, they have to go through the dwarven hold of Belenskix, because the dwarves have tunnels called the Deep Roads that lead underneath the mountain range and into the desert. And Ratch has found out that there is a dwarven clan there that makes constructs, not magical ones like him. Their constructs are purely mechanical, clockwork kind of things. But he wants to learn more about how he might have been constructed. So he's hoping that they can give him some insight into that. So the group returned to Garensford to resupply and get ready, and then prepared to head out on the road to Belenskix. All right, so it looks like we got all the touch-up done on that central ridge. So now we'll spin this guy around and get to work over here. So yeah, they traveled south to Belenskix, which is only a couple days away. It's actually where the Dwarven cartel was from. They were building a road from Belenskix up to Garensford. Okay, we're going to need a little bit more touch-up over there. And the road itself, the travel itself was pretty safe or pretty uneventful rather, because the roads here are safe. The dwarves do a pretty good job of keeping their trade roads open. So the dwarves are actually doing pretty good. So Damison is just north of the Serpent Spine Mountains, which run along the border between Damison and Kadasha. And there are dwarven holds scattered all through those mountains. And they were allies of Damison prior, but during the war, they pretty much sold weapons and armor to everybody. So they came out of the situation pretty darn good. They are a significant mercantile power in the area now. And pretty much all the houses of Damison have been wrecked. So even the ones that are still standing aren't in great shape as far as finances or industry or anything. So the dwarves are in an extremely strong position, and they've been kind of leveraging that. Anyway, so the road to Belenskix is quite safe. And that's just something I use in my setting. Skix is the dwarven word for keep or hold. So all the dwarven cities are named after the person who founded them. So Belenskix is literally like Belen's hold or Belen's keep. So they get to Belenskix, they start poking around there, and the holds are all divided up into sections. They've got basically their public section where merchants travel through and can, heck. Yeah, well, that's a little bit of overlap there, but it's not too bad. Gonna have to be a little more careful going forward. So they've got their public area where merchants come through and do, conduct trade and whatnot, and then they've got, the dwarf only area where all the clans have their homes and their important industries that they don't want getting exposed. I mean, not in any nefarious way, just, when people come over to your house, you don't let them into your bedroom, that kind of thing. So they get to Belenskix, they start asking around, and they encounter, and the very first thing they encounter is some guards up front in the main gate. They ask them, hey, what's been going on? We're planning on traveling through Kadasha, or traveling through the deep roads to Kadasha. And the guards let them know that the deep roads have been closed for a couple of weeks now because something is down in the roads attacking caravans. They don't know what it is, and because of some decent role playing and some persuasion rolls, the guards let on that the Council of Thanes has been surprisingly slow to deal with the situation in the deep roads. So the dwarves run their cities via council. Basically, all of the major houses have a representative that goes to the Council of Thanes, and then they decide as a group. So like they don't have a king or even like a chief executive. It's purely council vote. And the Council of Thanes has been surprisingly reluctant, it seems, to deal with this situation, which is strange because, as I said, the dwarves are very big on maintaining trade and making sure that their business continues. So they start asking around about that, and they confirm that with several other people that the deep road's been closed for a bit. Nothing seems to be getting done about it. And while they're hanging out in one of the local taverns, they find a group of humans, a group of refugees from the Barrison holds who have decided to move farther east in an attempt to get farther away from the elves and the potential incursion. They do not take very kindly to Demetrius's presence, but he goes over and starts a conversation with them and basically tries to convince them, hey, we're not all terrible, I promise. Which, at the time, they don't really respond positively to, but we do find out later that at least some of them started to think about it. Kind of wondering, like, why would this? What's with this? What's with this elf? That was kind of weird. Why would he bother doing that if he wasn't being sincere? Because Demetrius's player is pretty big on trying to rehabilitate the elves at this point. So he is waging a PR war. Hashtag not all elves. No, that's gonna be a little tricky there. But they decide to go investigate the situation with the deep roads. And they go to find the Seneschal of Belenskix, who's basically the mayor. He's appointed by the the Council of Thanes to kind of deal with the day-to-day stuff, the wheels of bureaucracy that they don't want to have to be bothered with on a daily basis. And he tells them straight up, yeah, I don't know what's going on here. Usually the council is very good about dealing with these situations, but they seem to be in some kind of gridlock. However, since you are outsiders, if the situation were to be resolved, I certainly wouldn't complain. And since you're trying to get to Kadashah anyway, it could be in your interest to do so. Which is a fancy way of saying they're not getting paid for this. But he did raise a good point. They're trying to get to Kadashah. So as long as the deep roads are closed, they can't get through. So they agreed to look into the matter. And he worked out a plan to smuggle them out the gates, basically, into the deep roads. So when that took place, they found themselves out of the city and into the deep roads underneath Balanskix. And the deep roads are not quite the Underdark. It's not that far down. Heck. One moment. That's a little too much. I'm gonna try to. Nope, that's not gonna work. Okay, so gonna need a little bit of touch up there with the. Need some touch up there with the marshmallow again. But yeah, the deep roads are not quite the Underdark. They're just sort of normal, normal for a fantasy world caverns. And there's an area that's sort of been cleared and marked with waymarks, like mile markers, basically saying, hey, this way to Kadashah, do not get off the road. So they don't really have to worry about getting lost down here, as long as they stay on the path. So they travel into the deep roads along this marked path here, and for the first day or so, they don't find anything. They come to a way station, which is basically just a small house built into the side of the rock wall with a like a gate, a nice heavy gate outside, and a wall for basically just like a little fortified area where caravans can park for the night in safety. And they investigate that, and they're there we go. Ratch discovers a journal underneath one of the beds that looks like basically just a merchant's log. It starts off fairly normal, talking about what they're carrying and coming up from Kadashah. Kadashah is both the name of the desert and the name of a huge oasis trade city in the desert. But then the journal talks about the caravan getting attacked by some tentacled monstrosity from the darkness, and how they lost half their people in the first attack. And the second attack, they lost pretty much everyone else, and that the writer of the journal, along with one other, just started to flee and managed to get away. And they got to the way station, hoping to find refuge. And that tomorrow they would set out and hopefully make it to Balanskix. But it noted that the companion, not the journal writer, but the person he was with, was starting to act kind of suspicious, and that he was going to have to keep an eye on him just to make sure nothing happened. And that was the last entry in the journal. And it was around about this time that something slammed into the gate outside. So they go out to investigate that, and they find that there are these figures trying to claw their way over the wall, and about a dozen of them make it in before Quintilius casts a wall of flame across the gate, scorching the other half that were trying to get in. As these people come in, the group realizes that they are in fact people, humans and dwarves and whatnot, but they've got this sort of dead, lifeless look in their eyes, like, the lights are on but no one's home kind of thing. And as they attack, they're not using weapons, and they're not not like punching and kicking. They just latch onto you, and you kind of feel your life force being drained away. So they end up fighting those guys, take them out. And the firewall handled the second half of them, so the fight actually wasn't that difficult because they bottlenecked them in the door leading into the way station, and Demetrius is holding the door, and he's a quite brawny fellow, so they couldn't push past him. So they realized that whatever was down here. They examined the bodies, and they found that they all had a small puncture wound at the very base of their neck. So they concluded that whatever was down here was attacking people and poisoning them or mind controlling them or something. They hadn't really figured out what exactly, but was turning them into kind of a living zombie. I do believe that is all the touch-up purple we need to do. Yeah, I think that's it. So we're gonna set that down. Gonna cap up this. But after that, they rested for the night, and the next day they headed out to try to backtrack wherever those people had come from. And at the end of that session, they found they ended up leaving the road and going off into the caves. But in a large cavern, they discovered an area where there had been a cave-in. The wall had collapsed, revealing beyond worked metal structure, like hallways and tunnels down there. And that was where we ended the last session, right before they went into there. So, let's see here. I think we still have a little bit of touch-up to do. Just a handful of little bits. Let me see here. That should be dry enough. I think we can just knock that out real quick here, because I think we just crossed the 3-hour mark, and I would really like for this to be finished, since it is taking longer than I thought it was going to. Hopefully, yep. That just doesn't want to cooperate. There we go. We'll just slap some more paint on there. Oh, but the reason, so that is the synopsis of the campaign up to this point. I'm sure I've missed some stuff because, as I said, this game started about 8 months ago. We've been running every 2 weeks, so that's 16, 17 sessions maybe. But that's all the high points. And they actually just, not this past session, but the session before, they got to learn the name of the campaign, which is Children of the Dark Star. The reason they know that, so the characters don't know this. Sort of a bit of a dramatic irony. So I posted a little bit of fiction that I just wrote up in a Google Doc, and I ended up sending it to them just so they could enjoy it, even if it's something their characters wouldn't know. I think it enhances the experience for the players to kind of know that something's going on. So it started off with those guys that Demetrius had been talking to, sitting in the tavern in Garensford, discussing what their next plans were. They'd left Belenskix and they were planning on heading east into territory of House Vossen, which is one of the only surviving houses and one of the strongest. So they were planning on heading there. Oh, now see, I missed. Well, hang on, I've still got the brush here, and it's still got some paint on it. So just, and then of course, as this is what I was saying earlier with the base, you can go back and forth forever, because every time you do touch up on one thing, you're going to end up messing up a little bit on something else, and at some point, you just need to say, okay, it's good. I'm going to stop now. And if you're a little OCD, that can be difficult. But yeah, so these guys were hanging out in the tavern at Garensford, talking about what they were going to do. They were planning on going to House Vossen. They were discussing talking to Demetrius and what that weird elf was talking about. And then we cut away from them to a woman cloaked, dressed in leather armor with daggers, strung around in bandoliers, getting up from a nearby table, going outside, and meeting up with Aeolus, the elven warrior that had been tracking Demetrius. And she told him, "Hey, you were right. They didn't go to Deep Haven. House Vossen is the one that controls Deep Haven, so that's the same area. Hey, you were right. They didn't go to Deep Haven. They've gone south to Belenskix." And then the two of them stopped for a moment, like, why the heck are they going to Oh, they're going to Kadashah. What do they know that they're not supposed to? And then the two of them kind of snipe at each other for a moment, like. Aeolus says, well, maybe your master's former, your master's former project told them something, and she shoots back, or maybe your wayward prince's new goddess. And so there's some tension there for a moment. Oh shoot! How the heck did I manage that? Look at that! I got some random purple splashes all down the center there. And then that little bit of fiction concludes with Aeolus telling her, "Okay, you contact your master. I'll contact my king and queen. Let them know what's going on, because the children of the Dark Star are awakening, and nothing can stop their ascension." So the players are aware that the villains are teaming up to follow them. Their characters do not know that yet. Emphasis on yet, because they will soon. I was kind of hoping that was going to be when I finished the painting, because that would have been a really cool, dramatic way to end the video. But regrettably, I have some more touch-up that needs to be done. So, what the heck? Oh, that's the wet purple from where I touched up just a minute ago. Shoot, that's awkward. All right, that'll do. Okay, let's do one last spin here. Make sure that we're not missing anything. Let's see, here's where the OCD kicks in and starts to make my life difficult. Okay, well, That's not OCD. That's just awful looking. But yeah, so we ended off with them discovering that cave-in that led into some kind of complex underground, which they are going to investigate. Let's see, that game was this past Wednesday, so yeah, it'll be another week and a half. Every single segment, I'm going to hit that camera. Yeah, it's another week and a half before we pick that up again. Grab the base here, that way I can turn it around without putting my hand in any wet paint, hopefully. All right, I think we are going to call that done. I do believe that that's all the touch-up I need to do. And as I said, this is not a competition piece. This is something that's going to look cool when I slap it down on the table and try to eat my players with it. Yeah, some of that's still wet, so I will try to take a careful little spin around here so you can get a look at the finished product. I really like the way that toasted marshmallow came out. That just looks great, especially in contrast with the purple. And that metallic was definitely a good choice. I like the gleam there. Give it a nice little spin here. And also that base, you can see the mix of that chocolate sprinkle and the chestnut came out really well. Got some areas there that look wet like mud, and some areas that look dry like dirt. It's just a good mix on the shading. And again, that also that dark black coat as a base layer on the mouth with the pink over it, I think definitely looks better than just slapping some bubblegum pink in there and calling it a day. But you see there, I mean, it's not really that difficult. I mean, it was time consuming. We're just a little past 3 hours at this point. But super basic brushes, super basic paints, just time and effort. And you see how easy it is to get cool effects with just a little bit of layering and the correct paint selection. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope it was fun, entertaining. I hope it inspired you to go and maybe try painting your own. Even if it didn't, I hope I was at least able to keep you occupied for the last 3 hours with some of my stories and watching me paint. If you did enjoy this, please hit like, subscribe, drop a comment, share the video. All hail the algorithm. Also, I do run games professionally over on Start Playing. The link will be down in the description. So if you really enjoyed the sound of my voice, you can find more of it there. And I will have more videos out. The plan is to drop a new video every Friday. I will try to keep to that schedule as best I can. And I appreciate you stopping by. Have a good one.